Welcome to a very cold, dreary, and foggy Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca. Do a little bit of a review of the Lotus 49 here in iRacing for you. Driven this car a little bit. I've done a couple of videos featuring it. Really haven't done anything in depth. I've only driven it in practice sessions or private tests. I've never raced it, and I'm a bit timid in terms of going out there and trying to race it because it's a very difficult car to get a handle on, and certainly one that you've got to pay attention to what it wants to do. You're not entirely in control of it. You kind of have to find a balance between of what you want the car to do and what the car has a mind of its own to do. So, give you a little bit of a sense of what it's like to drive if you guys haven't driven it already. It's a fantastic little car. Great power, great acceleration. Brakes are horrible. Mechanical grip through the corners is marginal. Fair to be nice. Horrible to be a little bit more critical, but absolutely no aero to help you. So it's a completely different experience driving one of these cars in comparison to one of the more modern ones. Even the Lotus 79 here in iRacing is much more in tune with what you'd expect from a modern car in terms of the Star Mazda, even the Skip Barber car here in iRacing. You have aero to help you. I'd say this car is more similar to the Skip Barber than anything else, but again, even that has some aero to help you out. So in terms of high speed corners, this can't do them. Low speed stuff, you got to be careful. The kink here on the start finish straight, in most of the other cars here in iRacing, that is just a kink. You can stay pretty much flat out the whole time. This, it's a proper corner. I don't dare stay on the throttle through that kink. So enough chatter. Let's start the engine, get out onto the racetrack here. Again, it's cold and foggy here. So, gonna have our work cut out for us. Very long and actually a bit technical pit out here at Laguna Seca. In practice sessions or any other session where you got other cars on track, you gotta watch that you don't mess up this pit out, because you'll get a penalty for that. To the racetrack, it's chilly here. I set the ambient temps for about 65 degrees. So when the tires do come up to temperature, the little grip that they offer anyway, be even more diminished. Won't be setting any lap records here today, that's for sure. You can see already, not going for it by any stretch of the imagination, and already had a couple opposite lock moments here on the outlap. Just trying to get my bearings. I know the circuit very well, but haven't driven it in a while. And of course the slightly impaired visibility here, not making things easy. The wonderful sounds from that Cosworth DFV. One thing I definitely have to compliment the guys in iRacing for, other than obviously their fantastic sim that they've built here, their sounds, I mean, second to none, in my opinion. A handful of R-Factor mods that come close, but in terms of consistency and an all-over package for top quality sounds, iRacing, second to none, in my opinion. Just trying to build up the temperature here in this thing. The only thing I don't particularly like about the latest build of iRacing is this ghost car. I like the idea that you got the real-time split in front of you. The only other car that used to have that was the Williams FW31. You had it on the steering wheel, the splits, but now they've got the on-screen graphics on the HUD, which is actually quite nice. Problem is, that ghost car actually does impair your visibility in a lot of places. See what I mean? I mean, if I were going for it here, say on a quali lap, I wouldn't want that distraction. Just to have the bar on top is sufficient, in my opinion. You can, of course, turn it off. I believe the default is the tab key, which I'm hitting now. In between gear shifts, of course. There we go. I've turned off the sector splits entirely. The thing I don't like, I don't know how you just turn off the ghost car. It's very Gran Turismo-ish, to be quite honest, and I don't really appreciate it on a sim of this caliber. But minor complaints from me. Anyway, focus on the task at hand, which is this ad hoc review of the Lotus 49. It's a car that definitely keeps you wondering what it's going to do next. It's not very predictable from one lap to the next, even one corner to the next, to be quite honest, because just think of the numbers here for a second. Got about 400 horsepower coming from that Cosworth DFV behind us. Car weighs as much as a Mini Cooper. So, and I'm talking about a 60s Mini Cooper. So 400 horsepower in a car that weighs, I don't know, 1,200 pounds? Less? Talking in terms of torsional rigidity, I think I've held tree branches that are stiffer. And the tires, I think we've got a set of Dunlops here from 1967. So we're not talking about the latest F1 spec from Pirelli, although they're not so hot either these days. We've got essentially what are road tires on a milk jug with a 400 horsepower engine. And I'm not exaggerating. You can see the acceleration is quite severe in terms of what the car does when you get on the noisy pedal. It accelerates just about as quickly as, well, to be honest, it's not that far off a modern Grand Prix car in terms of the kind of acceleration it'll dish out when it hits about 7,500, 8,000 revs there. Short squirt there. We're doing 134 miles an hour, I think. Just going through 2 gears. for all that acceleration, it's not matched by any means by the braking performance. I mean, I think most modern-day economy cars could easily outbrake this Lotus, and probably out-corner it as well, if I'm honest. Like I said, the chassis rigidity, or lack thereof, really does make it a bit of a handful around the corners when you start to stretch it out. I mean, this is a proper corner in this car. I mean, I'm not going as fast as it could, but I'm not that far off of the limit through there, to be perfectly honest. At least my limit. Back end got a little squirrely there. So your third gear here, get the power on, because I'm low down in the rev range. I mean, I really could be in second through these corners if I were brave. Oh, broke free. You see what I mean there? That corner wasn't a problem before. That time it was. It's really the unpredictability of this car that makes it such a challenge. The power isn't by any means overwhelming. In terms of the way the power is delivered, it's very predictable, very tractable. I mean, naturally aspirated engine, of course, so there's no surge from any turbos that you get on turbocharged engines. Of course, there's no lag either, and I was in the wrong place there. That's my fault. See what I mean there? You have to be so precise. I mean, a lot of this car is it almost feels like things are happening in slow motion, because for all the straight line performance it's got, it has absolutely none of it in the corner. So you arrive at a corner at some ridiculous speed, and then you've got to shed all of it off again before you actually arrive properly at the corner, because the car just has no aero to help you. So a lot of times when you're going through the corners, it's almost like somebody slowed the film down by like 50% or so, and then someone hits fast forward when you get on the straights. But for all of that pacing that you have to do, in terms of the contrast between the speed on the straights and how steady everything has to be in the corners, the amount of precision that you have to have in terms of placing the car on the racing line, on the apex, on the exit, it's still there just as much, if not more, than it has to be in one of the modern cars, because like you just saw with those two incidents I had in the last couple of laps, I was off of my intended line by maybe half a car width. And that little minuscule difference in terms of what the camber of the road is from where I was used to placing the car to where I then had it, those slight differences are enough to upset the balance of everything. Because we're dealing with 50-year-old technology, no aero help, and road tires, more or less, if you're not prepared to compensate immediately for those little variants in conditions from one lap to the next, it's going to catch you out, as you saw. In terms of the mechanics of driving the car, manual shifting. I'm not pre-selecting gears. I'm heel towing, if not actually double clutching on some of these downshifts, but of course you wouldn't be double clutching in the race, so don't imagine so, because you'd be trying to keep the pace up. But here, just trying to keep things out of the barriers. Pretty much exclusively it's right foot braking, because obviously you got a clutch on the upshifts and downshifts. You can get away with just lifting the throttle on the upshifts, but I'm not sure how realistic that is in terms of how the car really was. I remember a few years ago there was a feature that the BBC did, or was it ITV? I think it was ITV in Britain. A feature with Martin Brundle, who he was testing the Lotus 49, and he made a remark about having to use the gearbox sequentially, if I recall correctly. So if that's the case, in the interest of realism, definitely want to try to emulate that as much as possible here in iRacing. Here, any other car, this is just a normal crest. This, the car gets extremely light because, again, there's not much weight to begin with, and then you carry that kinetic energy over the crest there, and the car gets extremely light. It rides up off of the struts. You see the front wishbones start to decompress as all the weight transfers up. The car gets into that heave moment, and the back end gets extremely squirrely when that happens. I mean, pretty much every track I've driven this car at so far, be it Watkins Glen, Zolder, or here at Laguna Seca, every little variation in the road surface is magnified by at least 5 times in this car, if not more. Been able to tell by now, the iRacing team have done an absolutely brilliant job, sensational job really, in terms of the modeling and animation inside and out. I mean, the cockpit, all the gauges at work, and for the most part are readable, especially the tack in the center. I actually find myself looking at the tack quite a bit, to be honest. Obviously it's readable, and it does give you a good sense of what's going on with the engine. And it has a little peak needle for the max revs that you've hit during the run. Nice touch. It's the same way on the Lotus 79. The other thing, the view out of here. It's fantastic in terms of trying to place the car. I mean, look at the left front wheel over the curb. You can see the whole wheel. You can see the suspension reacting as it goes over the bumps and the curbing. I mean, it definitely helps. Obviously, you know, because this is a sim and we don't have the pleasure of being allowed to take out a real one. The more feedback that I can get, at least in my case, the more feedback I have, visually speaking, or in terms of sounds, the easier it is for me to process everything that's going on and to make adjustments if I need to. So I really appreciate the high resolution textures and models, and of course all the movement in the suspension. Driving a car like this, it's very helpful. Depending on how you've got your force feedback set up, feedback through the steering wheel will be fair. My force feedback settings are, actually I don't quite know what they are in terms of exact details, but Steering feel is fair. Wheels weighted nicely. And of course, most of these things are adjustable to your preferences, whatever they may be. I tend to like a fair amount of force feedback, not overpoweringly so, but enough to give me enough information about what all four corners are doing. Like all the other cars that I've driven in iRacing, you can really get a sense of where all four corners are at all times. There's no question, no guesswork in terms of are we on line or not, are we sliding. A little bit of rear locking there, for example. I am using a stock G27 with the shifter and pedals. I've done no mods on it whatsoever, so it's sufficient. I know Fanatic and a lot of custom rig builders have some much better gear, but for my purposes, I'm only casually doing this. It's fine. Got the power a bit early there. Little surprise oversteer. This car really doesn't have a tendency to oversteer as much as you might think. For as much power as it has, as long as you're reasonably competent at feeding in the power, it's not going to catch you out with oversteer, at least power on oversteer. Mid-corner oversteer is actually a real threat in this thing, and it's something that you have to be very, very diligent in keeping an eye on, because the car has a tendency to just drift, go into four-wheel drifts through corners from apex to exit, and if you're on top of it, you can use that slide to power you through the corner. You can kind of stay part throttle through most of the corner and just use that slide to maintain the forward momentum. But if you're not ready for it, it's just unsettling. Depending on what your driving style is like, you can get away with left foot braking. Like for example, through this next corner, left foot braking now instead of blending brake and throttle as we go through. Again, had that mid-corner oversteer. It wasn't quite a four-wheel drift. Probably because I overcorrected a bit as well. But and there started to break free because I got the right rear a little bit off the circuit, but and here gotta watch the crest again. See the cars in heave. Gotta come off the power. Little wiggle through the steering. Keep everything in line. And the corkscrew car gets very light, no big compression, and that big compression continues all the way down the hill now through this left-hander. Left foot braking, trail braking a little through here, correcting slides constantly. Now back to right foot braking for the heel toe downshifts. Get first gear here, clip the apex, try to get on the power here, short shift into second, and now run through the gears, short shift into fifth. 146 miles an hour, we just kissed it there. A little harsh on the downshifts. And this is a car that I think even very experienced simmers are going to have to get a lot of laps in before they start to feel confident. I'm certainly nowhere near confident enough in both the my understanding of the dynamics of the car, as well as my abilities to get on top of it again when things start to go a bit pear-shaped. But again, this car definitely approaches the limits of my ability. I mean, driving it at semi-relaxed pace like we are now, it's not much of a problem, but if I really went for it, I guarantee I'd be making quite a few visits to the barrier. this will be our last lap before we pit. Not quite sure if the old adage smooth is fast quite applies with this car. There's a heck of a lot of chasing it all the way around the corner. And even in a lot of cases down the straights. I mean, the back end will break free in a straight line in a lot of cases, and it really caught me by surprise the first few laps I turned in this thing. Corkscrew. I have no idea how to go fast through this corner, to be honest. It's one of those things that you either... I think it's more instinct than anything. I've done well in a couple races in the Mazda MX-5s around here, but nothing else. It's a great circuit. I wish we could get this thing on the Formula 1 calendar, but I don't think it quite reaches that 1A spec from the FIA. It's a pity. It's a great circuit. Definitely one of the best in North America, if not the world, but whatever the case may be, we're back in the pit lane. It's really a fantastic car. I mean, my abilities are pretty much at the limit, you know, in this thing. Definitely a bit tentative, and still I managed to have a couple moments, so you get a sense of what it is, I hope. Most of the time, it gives you a little bit of a false sense of security because things are okay on the straight for the most part, and the kind of power it has in a straight line, it kind of makes you think that the response under braking and in the corners would be proportional, but surprise, it's not. The brakes are probably about the same as what you get on a typical road car nowadays, and the tires, well, they're straight out of the 60s, so you have to brake so early, so much earlier than you might think. And in terms of grip through the corners, again, remember, no aero, and the car is sprung rather softly, so it likes to roll around. So most of the time you get into the four-wheel drifts through the corners where, you know, you're applying opposite lock and hopefully just holding that slide all the way through the exit, because at least in my experience, 9 times out of 10 I managed to get it wrong, where I either overcorrect or I just spin off and hit something. So thankfully we didn't manage to hit anything, but managed to do a couple of spins, so hopefully it gives you some idea of what to expect from the iRacing Lotus 49 if you guys haven't driven it already. Again, I think it goes for $11.95, and definitely well worth it. It's a fantastic car. So thanks for watching, and see you later.